To Thursday Bible study. Today we're going to be looking at Exodus 23. Had a moment there. Before we go any further, let's open in prayer. Get my head straight here. Father God, just cleanse my mind of everything else, Lord, and just help me to focus on your word, Lord. Just let the words come through me, your words, Lord. And just help us to have wisdom, help us to understand, help us to know what we can use out of this for ourselves to reach other people. And we just thank you, Lord, for your word in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, the scripture for the week is Psalm 86:11. Teach me your way, O Lord, and I will walk in your truth. Unite my heart to fear your name. And the book of mysteries is 106. And it's called the Audible Sapphire. Now, this is a little bit premature because next week we're going to be talking about the sapphire. I'm going to kind of go into that a little bit because it's really a fascinating thing, and there's something very unique about it concerning the throne of God. So this is just a little teaser to get you to pay attention next week about it. So, 106. The teacher opened one of the drawers in his desk and took out what appeared to be a precious stone of deep blue. He placed it in my hand. It's a biblical sapphire. What's very nice, I replied, not knowing what else to say. I didn't give it to you because of its appearance, because of what it might signify, because of its origin. Its origin? The origin of its name. Sapphire? Yes, said the teacher. Sapphire comes from a French word, which comes from a Latin word, which comes from a Greek word, which comes from an ancient biblical Hebrew word, sapphire. So sapphire comes from the biblical Hebrew, I said. What's the significance of the name? Well, the Hebrew word for sapphire comes from the Hebrew root, saphar. And saphar means to speak, to tell, to declare. So the word sapphire ultimately means to speak. What's the connection? Well, the connection is this, said the teacher. More precious than any treasure jewel is any word, and every word of God is a sapphire, a spoken sapphire, and yet much more precious. If no one has treasures in this world, but has the word of God, then one is rich. Every word of God is a treasure of priceless value. So when you read or hear a word from God, receive it as if you were receiving a precious jewel, and give it the same way. How? Well, your words must be as sapphires. You don't need to possess precious jewels. You just have to speak them. Every time you open your mouth to speak, let what comes out be a sapphire, a gift to be given to those who need to receive a precious jewel. Every word that comes out of your mouth be a precious jewel. Give jewels to those in need, jewels of blessing, jewels of encouragement, jewels of strength, jewels of mercy, jewels of love, jewels of forgiveness, jewels of joy, and jewels of hope. Let your every word bring life to those who hear it. A spoken jewel, an audible sapphire. The mission today, make every word that comes out of your mouth a precious jewel, a gift of life, the spoken sapphire. Wow. And there is a secret little thing beyond there. Well, look who's here. Hi there. We'll have to hear about all your adventures. There's a secret thing behind this we're going to talk about next week. I'm so excited about it. I want to tell you now, but I just want to give you a clue. It has something to do with the 10 Commandments. So I'll just leave it at that and let you puzzle about it unless you want to do some research. But it's wonderful. It's really wonderful. Okay. Remember, the clue besides that is a sapphire is a word. Okay. Now, my Hebrew word study today, I've chosen Malak. Up on the board, the very first one. Malak is angel. That is Hebrew for angel. And the definition of an angel is a messenger. Now, we know they say there are many kinds of angels. There's actually a little controversy over how many there are. We don't know for sure. But some beings may not be angels because they're not necessarily messengers. So we don't know that. What God surrounds him with in heaven are living beings. That's what he calls the living beings. And they have 4 faces, and their wings are, I think they have 4 wings. So we don't know if those are angels or not, if they're considered angels or not, because the Bible calls them living beings. So just throw that out. But the word angel, messenger, is used quite a bit in here. Malach, today we're going to look at Malach Yahweh. And Yahweh, of course, is the name for the Lord God, the Father. And Malach Yahweh, you put it together, Malach angel, angel of the Lord. Angel of the Lord. So when you read the angel of the Lord, that is Jesus Christ before he came to earth. And so if it's an angel, it's usually just meaning an angel of the Lord, his heavenly host, one of his heavenly hosts. But the angel of the Lord, usually the A is capitalized when we run across it, and we will today. So remember that. Then really close to this spelling is Melech. You see up there. Melech is king. So Malach is angel, Melech is king. It's kind of easy to get them confused. The next one is Haman. We're going to find that word because Haman means to destroy. And very closely related is Hamas. Now, I'm sure you've all heard the word Hamas. Okay, in Hebrew that means, and I'm sure in Arabic, it means almost the same thing. It means violence. And what a perfect name for PLO's terrorist group, be called Hamas. Okay. So, last week we looked at chapter 22, and Moses went up into the cloud. And to me, I have more of a picture of fog. I think that would probably, in my mind at least, that would be a better description of what he was doing. It was a dark kind of fog you couldn't see through. That just kind of makes it seem more practical to me in my mind. And he went up in there, and God called him up to him in that. So we know God was within that fog, that cloud. I believe that was really what we call Shekinah glory. It's Shekinah is how it's pronounced in Hebrew, but we'll just call it Shekinah because everybody knows that. So he went up there, and remember, he was shaking in his boots, but he went up. He obeyed God. So often, we're called to do things, and boy, it sounds like impossible, or it sounds like maybe people think we're crazy, or, who knows. It just sounds dangerous. But when God calls you, he's going to take care of you. Everything's going to be fine, and it doesn't matter what other people say and do. You follow him. That's what he wants you to do. If you don't do it, it's just like Esther. If she hadn't done it, God would have found another way to do it. But you'll miss the blessing. And your life will be a failure in that area, failure as far as God. I mean, because he wanted you to do that object. So, and even if it's just a little thing, sometimes God will say, speak to someone that you don't know, Well, that's hard to do. Yeah, but, if he's telling you to do it, you better do it. So, I'm talking to myself here. So, this trip that he's on this time is going to last 40 days and 40 nights. We'll find that out later, but I want you to understand he's still up there. When we start chapter 23, God is still talking to him. God has a lot of things to tell him, a lot of instructions. And so he's just filling him up with all these instructions. I don't know if Moses was taking notes all this time or just what he was doing, but he had a lot to remember, and of course, he did a good job. Okay, another thing I want to mention is the commandments. We've been looking at these, and they seem really harsh to us. And but we have to put it into perspective. We have to remember where they came from and what the society was like that they'd come out of, and what the society was like they were going to be going into. A very cruel society, a very evil society. And so the things that God was telling them to do was a protection for them, and to keep them from going into and doing the evil things. And he was using them as a whole to show himself to the world. He was using them, and he was going to present himself through them by their character and their authority that he gave them, so that people would understand who God is and that they needed God in their lives. They failed many times, but God is still using them, and still will use them for that. In fact, during the millennium, it says that people will grab a Jew's shirt tail or tallit or whatever and just say, "Tell me more about God." As they pass on the street, it's going to be that way. So they're still going to be doing God's work that way. All right, let's open up. Well, I guess I'm not through here yet. I wanted to remind everybody about Israel being God's firstborn son. We kind of tend to forget that. But in Exodus 4:22, that's exactly what God called him, his firstborn son, his treasured possession. So he had set Israel apart for his purposes, and not in just in his name, but in his in their conduct. So very important. He wanted them to be an example. Why was Israel given her name? Israel means wrestles with God. Some people interpret it to mean triumphant with God. It could be either one. I'm not sure which. That's just how it's come down now. We don't really understand which. However, it has to do with God, and they were representing God through his name, part of their name. The L part in Israel is God. You know, we are called Christians, and we are to represent Christ because we bear his name. It's the same thing for us. And we are responsible for mirroring God's character and his authority. He's given us that. We are to mirror it. We aren't godly as we will be, I shall say, you know, when we get our new bodies and everything. But right now, when we open our mouths, whatever actions we take, we need to remember that we are representing Christ and his authority and his character, and people judge us on that. He wants us to be that, but he wants us to be to act godly as he wants us to, and to present himself. That's why Moses got into trouble when he struck the rock the second time for the second water source. God told him to speak, and instead he said, "You rebels," and he just struck it twice, you know, because he was having a temper tantrum, getting impatient with the people, and God punished him, or disciplined him, I should say, for doing that, because that was to be a picture of Christ. The rock was Christ. He was struck once, which was when his death and burial and resurrection, and then nothing had to happen again. That was done. And when he struck it the second time, that was just the opposite of what God wanted that picture to be to the people. And so he also was giving the people the impression that God was angry with them, and God wasn't angry with them. It was Moses that was angry. So he was showing his feelings rather than God's feelings, but they were interpreting it because they knew he represented God. So we have to be careful what we do and say all the time, because we are representing our Lord. Okay, now let's open chapter 23, and we're going to read 1 through 3. And we're continuing on with, at this point, we're continuing on with some of the commandments. He's explaining them further, giving more detail to a lot of these things. You shall not spread a false report. You shall not join hands with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. You shall not fall in with many to do evil, nor shall you bear witness in a lawsuit, siding with the many, so as to pervert justice. Nor shall you be partial to a poor man in his lawsuit. Well, there's a lot there, isn't it? And boy, we can look in the news today and see not many people are reading their Bible. Let's just put it that way. The first one, you shall not spread a false report. I say you shall not gossip. Let's put that in there too, because boy, nothing does harm like gossip. Even if there's a seed of truth in it, it just gets worse as you spread it. I've never heard anything good from gossip. And it says, don't lift up your hand in oath to a false testimony. We talked about that in the last 2 weeks about the oath and how important the hand and the oath, that's what we still do that to this day. Don't become part of the mob rule. Don't let yourself get swept into doing something, just because everybody else is doing it. It just ends in disaster. Don't show partiality, whether a man is rich or whether he's poor. It can go either way. You can feel sorry for someone who's poor and then kind of go overboard on the justice for him, or you can not value him and not give him the justice that he deserves. Don't give extra privilege due to circumstances, good or bad. And we see that today in our government all the time, don't we? They're trying to make amends for things that happened hundreds of years ago. And maybe just recently, or maybe they're not even there. They're just making up things, and enlarging upon things that happen. So let's read 4 through 5. If you meet an enemy's ox or his donkey going astray, you shall bring it back to him. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying down under a burden, you shall refrain from leaving him with it. You shall rescue it with him. So we're supposed to be show kindness to animals. We are in charge of the animals of this earth, just like Adam was, and I hate to see anything suffer. It doesn't matter if it's somebody you don't like, it's your neighbor that's been mean to you, and he's got an animal that's in trouble. Why, we still need to help that animal, don't we? Plus, maybe this will be a start of something good with that person that is your enemy, so-called enemy. Maybe that'll bring you closer together, and there'll be a forgiveness in the whole thing. And many times it can work that way. It's like a soft answer can turn away wrath. This is the same type of thing, but it's in so doing. And we can just enlarge upon this. If somebody's having difficulties, if there's a car trouble or whatever, with someone who you've had words with or had problems with, if you can help, why, sometimes that just makes things all better and just kind of clears up the situation instead of being angry with them and making it worse or hoping for the worst for them. Why, pray for them and try to help them. And this is what God is wanting us to do. So many of these things are so practical today. There's nothing new. And we just need to remember that. 6 through 9. You shall not pervert justice due to your poor in the lawsuit. And that's pretty much the same thing we had before. Remember that God quite often will say the same thing, sometimes just in the same sentence. He'll just put it in a few different words to emphasize, to make sure you get the idea. Maybe you don't understand the first part, while you understand the second part, and it just all goes together, and I think that's what this is doing here. Keep far from a false charge, and do not kill the innocent and righteous, for I will not acquit the wicked. Boy, I just couldn't help but think about all the unborn, over 63 million unborn. And God says, I will not acquit the wicked. He's not going to excuse all of this. And people better start remembering that. You shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. No bribes. You shall not oppress a sojourner or a foreigner. You know the heart of a sojourner, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. So be kind to them and help them and treat them just as you wish you'd been treated when you were in that foreign land. And someone said last week, well, that makes me think of all the people coming across the border and all, you know. Because they're breaking the law, I can't condone it, but we can still understand their wanting, most of them, wanting a better life for their families. And so we do need to help them in ways that we can, but I'm not condoning, you know, that. So, because so many people came in the right way, you know, and it's not fair to just open the doors. We can't handle everybody. We just can't. There's just no way. So it's one of those things we have to just try to balance out. Let's see. I want to go back to the baby thing because I want to talk a little bit how sometimes people will change words to make it softer. I remember when abortion was allowed, I believe it was in 73, that was the year my daughter was born, and it just struck me, you know, here's this baby. And so many people were killing their babies at the time. But they started calling them, they didn't call them babies, they called them a fetus. And all that word is just Latin for an unborn child. But they've taken that word because it sounded foreign, and it just seems easier to do away with the cells of a fetus than it is a baby. And so we are used that way if we allow them to do that to us, to change these words, and they do it all the time, you know. They, every time I hear radio or something, I hear something new, and I'm, what's that, you know, and they've changed the words to mean just, you know, so we can accept it. So it just deadens our sensitivity to the truth and to what is wrong, and helps us to accept evil. And it just compounds itself as we go. I just think we need to kind of watch for that because they're doing it all the time.
It's my understanding that they're killing healthy born babies.
That what?
Born healthy babies, they're killing.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
true?
In many places, yes. Some states, well, the things that they're doing, if people knew how the abortions work and what they did to the babies, they'll reach in and they'll pull arms and legs off. And the doctors do this. And then they sell parts.
The parts are more viable after the baby is born.
And and you know, collagen, you have to be careful. Skin care uses collagen, and some places have used the unborn cells in that because they found that it rejuvenates the skin because it grows so quickly, you know, like a little child grows so quickly. Just the thought of it just makes me sick to think about. But we are, you know, these things are out there and we don't even know what's going on. We don't know what we're using. And so it's a terrible thing, and we just need to pray that God is going to bring an end to it.
There's a good book. Have you ever read The Hand of God?
I haven't.
Okay. I'll bring it to you and you can
Okay.
glance at it. It's about devotion.
Yeah. Terrible, terrible things going on. And I remember I was a little bit involved with Right to Life at one time, and we had a video of a woman who was also involved on national level, and she had a 2-year-old, and she was watching this movie of an abortion, and her 2-year-old came down the stairs. She didn't realize she was kind of sneaked down, and she was watching, and she said, "Who broke the baby?" That child was able to realize that was a baby, whereas other people just called it, cells. So, I'll get off my soapbox for now. Let's see. Where did I leave off? Somebody help me.
Verses 10 through 12, they had 6
10.
years to grow and harvest crop.
Okay, I'm stopped right in the middle of something, didn't I? Okay, 10 through 12. For 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its field, but the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poorer of your people may eat, and that you may leave the beasts of the fields some to eat, and you shall do likewise in your vineyards and in your olive orchard. 6 days you shall do your work, but on the 7th day you shall rest, that your ox and your donkey may rest, and the son of your servant woman and the alien may be refreshed. Okay, so God gave them 6 years to grow and produce their crops. In that time, they were to, and I'm just surmising this, it just makes sense, save up, harvest, all those harvesting, they need to save up for that 7th year. You don't want to just use up everything, and then that 7th year comes, and what are you going to do? Because you aren't going to be able to plant. The 7th year was the Sabbath year, just like 6 days, and then the 7th day is the Sabbath day. This is 6 years, and the 7th year is the Sabbath year. And when you get 7 times 7, then the 50th year is the Shemitah, and that's a very special year. But you see how God is circular? Everything is circular. Okay, I'm going to talk about that a little later. So they were to preserve everything they could, those 6 years, and then leave the land fallow, not work it at all, and anyone who was destitute would go in and would glean. They also were to do this at the end of their seasons, because those people had to eat all the time, not just the 7th year. So when you finish gleaning, and I think we learned this in Ruth, the book of Ruth, when she came in, they would glean, or the person that owned the land, who was working the land, would work all the area but leave the corners. They weren't to touch the corners, because the corners were for anyone who was poor to come in and glean. So that was the system. Okay, and in fact, there is a group called, I don't know if they're still working, but there used to be a group called the Gleaners here, and they would go around. I had a plum tree, and I couldn't get anybody to come get plums. Nobody wanted plums, they said. So, but that was the original thing. They were to come in and take what anyone wanted to offer like that, and then disperse them out through all the people. So, very biblical to be doing that. Now, the people did not follow this later on when they got into the Promised Land, and they got into big trouble over it. In fact, they were punished for 70 years when they went to exile in Babylon. And let's see, it's 2 Chronicles 36:21 will tell you that God allowed them to be in captivity for 70 years because they failed to keep the land at rest for 490 years. So if you take 7 years and you go into 490 years, because every 7th year would be the Sabbath, you would come out with 70 of the 70 Sabbaths in that 490 years. And so God took that 70 Sabbaths, 70 years, and that was their punishment, or their discipline. I should say discipline, not punishment. And so remember when Daniel was reading in Jeremiah and he came across that verse that said they would be in exile for 70 years? Yeah, that was it. So very interesting. But if they had obeyed, they would have saved themselves a lot of grief. Just like us today. Okay, verse 13. Here it says, pay attention to all that I've said to you, and make no mention of the names of other gods, nor let it be heard on your lips. Pay attention. Okay, that's important. This is very important. So he says, don't even mention names of other gods. Don't even let them come out of your mouth. I found that very interesting because we just throw it around all the time. But God does not want us to even mention these, especially at the time that they were worshiping around them, because it was putting those idols on the same level as God. When you talk about God and then you talk about them, he doesn't want to be on any other level except just himself up there. So, 3 times in the year you shall keep a feast for me. And of course, this is talking about 3 of the 7 feasts of the Lord. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. As I commanded you, you shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days at the appointed time in the month of Abib. That's the time for Passover and unleavened bread. For in it you came out of Egypt, none shall appear before empty-handed. And you shall keep the feast of harvest in the firstfruits of your labor. Of what you sow in the field, you shall keep the feast of ingathering at the end of the year, and you shall gather in from the field the fruit of your labor. 3 times in the year shall all your males appear before the Lord. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with anything leavened, nor let the fat of my feast remain until morning. The best of the firstfruits of your ground you shall bring into the house of the Lord your God, and you shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. This seems kind of odd to me. He kind of tacked that on. We'll talk about that in a minute. So he's giving them instructions about 3 of the feasts that are very important. All the feasts are important, but these 3, the males, anyone 20 years and older, was required to come. If at all possible. I mean, if you were in bed sick, why, And as we understand, he even made arrangements for anything similar to that because there was a second Passover 1 month later for those who could not make it for any reason. So people would have to go, and when they got into the Promised Land, the temple or the tabernacle at first, and then the temple was in Jerusalem later, and they would have to travel for miles to come to the feast. They'd have to leave whatever was going on at home. If they had crops and everything, they would have to leave somebody in charge if they had any helpers or any servants or family, and they'd have to go no matter what. It was required. So very important. God was very explicit about this. So they had to come for unleavened bread in the spring. The second one that was for Shavuot, or the Feast of Weeks. That's 50 days after first fruits. So that would be 50 days later, and that would be late spring, early summer. Probably really, really late spring. Okay, that's the second one. The third one is in the 7th month. So all the feasts go from the 1st month to the 7th month. God's using his numbers again. 7th month would be the Feast of Tabernacles. And they're all to be there for Feast of Tabernacles. Okay, they were not to. They were to bring the best of everything, and because God deserves the best, the first and the best, the firstborn and the best. So, no leaven was to be offered with his sacrifice, and the fat of my feast. The fat was the best part of the meat. the best cut that you could get, and that you offered that, and then it was burnt or it was barbecued. And it always says, God loved the sweet savor. He loved the smell of meat. So that's kind of neat. Okay, now we get down to the very last verse of this, and it's of verse 19, the last sentence. It says, "You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk." This is kind of a strange thing to me. We're not sure, even the Jewish sages aren't sure of why God did not want them to do that. He didn't really explain it. One reasoning is that all the Canaanites did this. We don't know if they boiled them in their own mother's milk, but they did boil kid in milk. So that may be trying to keep them from doing something that would have been the pagans do. The other thing is the idea that that was the life source of that kid before he was killed. And so it would be cruel to use his mother's milk, that it was his life source to cook him in. But the thing is, they still do this. Even Jews that don't practice their religion still keep this up. Many of them do. And they have 2 sets of dishes. They've taken this so far that they won't mix milk and meat products on a plate. And they never use, like if they have a set of dishes for milk, they'll never use that for meat. So they have to have 2 sets of dishes. And then if they have fancy dishes for Passover, they've got another set of dishes. So if you're a Jewish home maker, why then you will have a lot of dishes. And it goes with pots and pans too. They won't mix with pots and pans. Nothing can be mixed. So interesting, huh?
You have to have a big kitchen.
Yes. Okay, let's see. (20 through 24). Behold, I send an angel before you to guard you on the way. Now this is different from King James because it has a capital on the A. Angel. To guard you on the way, and this is English translation, English Standard. Behold, I send an angel before you to guard you on the way and bring you to the place that I've prepared. Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. Okay, so this, in Hebrew, I really believe this is referring to the angel of the Lord. I don't know what your versions say. Does it have a capital A?
Yes.
Okay.
Mine does.
Yours doesn't. Yeah. Okay. Well.
It says, mine says, oh, if I get my glasses right, usually taken to be a reference to the angel of Yahweh, who is distinguished from the Lord, who talks about him as another person. He is identified with him by reason of his forgiving sin and the Lord's name being in him.
Yep, in him. And Pastor, I was kind of amused last night because Pastor was talking about in him. Mm-hmm. And then that's exactly what it says here, in him. So, Malach, Yahweh. Okay, that is angel of the Lord, and that is what we have here. He's going to go before you to guard you and to bring you to the place where God is prepared. And so it says, pay attention to him and shema, listen and obey him. Don't provoke him. And the word in Hebrew, provoke, is grieve. Don't grieve him. it actually means that, but the actual word in there used is marar, and that is bitterness. And so the interpretation here is to trickle bitterness continually will grieve him. So if you are continually doing this, it's going to grieve him. And so God is saying, do not do this. Don't provoke him with your grieving and with your bickering and with your bitterness, because he will not forgive that without repentance. Of course, he'll forgive anything with repentance. If you carefully obey his voice and do all that I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. So that's quite a promise there. Listen and obey, and he'll be on your side. And of course, when you listen and obey, you're on God's side. And I've always heard people say, you don't want him on your side, you want to be on his side. But if you listen and obey, then you'll just automatically be on his side. So it all works together. When my angel goes before you and brings you to the Amorites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Canaanites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, and I blot them out, you shall not bow down to their gods nor serve them, nor do as they do, but you shall utterly overthrow them and break their pillars into pieces. So utterly destroy them. He's claimed that he wanted all of the Canaanites gone, destroyed. He didn't say that with some of the other groups, but the Canaanites, they were so filthy, they were so evil, it had to happen. You shall serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will take sickness away from among you. What a wonderful blessing and what a promise. He's going to make sure they have enough food and water. They won't have to worry about that. It may not be what they want, but it's what they need. And it's same with us. He gives us what we need, not necessarily what we want. But that next one, I will take away sickness from among you. What a wonderful promise that is. All the time they were traveling, they had no need to be ill. They were strong. They stayed strong. Their clothing lasted. Their shoes lasted. Wow. Wonderful. None shall miscarry or be barren in your land. Another wonderful promise. And of course, you know how important children was to these people. We can't even imagine the importance it was for them, as much as we love our children. It was everything. I mean, it was Social Security. It was the authority they had with other people, and of course, women. If she didn't have a son to look after in her old age, she was, who was going to do that? God made plans, and people were to look after other people like that, but that didn't always happen. And so this was very important to him, especially in the pagan communities too, because they didn't have the laws of God. I will fulfill the number of your days. In other words, you're going to live a long time, as long as you obey me. As long as you obey. I will send my terror before you and will throw into confusion all the people against whom you shall come, and I will make all your enemies turn their backs to you. They'll run from you. And the confusion, he did that during the Israeli wars back in 67 and I guess 73 also, and 48. When every time they were attacked, he'd cause confusion and they'd panic. And I remember when in World War I, when General Allenby came in and he dropped the flyers, and they misunderstood that, and they thought it said Allah instead of Allenby, and they all panicked. And the same thing happened, I think, in 67 with the some of the Arabs, and they thought there were a lot of tanks coming, they heard a lot of noise, but they didn't see them, but they just panicked, and they just all run. Some of them took their shoes off because they could run faster without their shoes, and they left their shoes, and the Israelis came, and they only had just a few, tanks, but they had gotten so confused about everything, and God just does this even today, so it's amazing. He means what he says, and he does what he says. The word here is, I will cut off your enemies. It's a form of karat, which means to kill or destroy. And when he says, I will utterly overthrow, it's haras, to destroy. Verse 28. Let's see. I haven't read verse 28. Okay. I will send hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites from before you. I will not drive them out from before you in 1 year, lest the land become desolate and the wild beasts multiply against you. Little by little I will drive them out from before you until you've increased and possessed the land. So here, he said he was going to send hornets. Now, it's possible that he was sending stinging wasps. Who would want to live with stinging wasps all around? But there's another possibility, because the Egyptian army had a heraldry symbol that they used, and it was a hornet. And so it's very possible that God was using that analogy, that the Egyptians were going to be coming back and forth, harassing and going up. And we know for a fact that they did that. They were up into Canaan all the time, and they found a lot of Egyptian leftovers, so to speak, that they found that they can't explain it any other way. It was just Egyptian style and Egyptian whatever. So we know that was happening. And he says that he wasn't going to let them just go into the promised land. They weren't ready yet. They needed to mature. They needed to have even more people being born, and just get ready for the big day. But they weren't ready yet. And he didn't want to clean out the whole area, because animals would come in, and then they'd have to fight that, or somebody else would come in. When you have a desolate land, it doesn't stay void. And he's cleaning it out little by little, so that when they come in, they can handle the situation. So that's pretty much what he did there. It made me think of the diaspora after 70 AD, when the temple was destroyed, and so many of the Jews were killed. I think 60,000 or something. I may be way off base there, but it was a lot of Jews were killed right in Jerusalem. And so they started moving and fleeing the area, and it's been going on ever since. The land after that became desolate over the years, and that was God's purpose. He didn't want anyone moving in because it was so great. The rain stopped, and they hardly had any rainfall over the years. And so then the deserts came in, and then when the Muslims took over, they required a tax of every tree you had. And so you know what happened then? Everybody cut their trees down so they didn't have to pay tax. And then that just made it even worse. And when the first Jews really started to trickle back at the turn of the last century, probably in the 1890s, quite a few of them started coming back. I don't mean quite a few, but compared to before, the land was a mess. It was swampland, mosquitoes, people died from malaria and all sorts of things, but they just kept at it little by little, working at it, until they changed the land. And it was hard work. It was really a terrible time for them, but it was good in the fact that they had their own land. And when they came in, they bought their land. Let me emphasize that. They bought their land. They didn't just go in and move in. So anybody that says it didn't belong to them, they did buy them. And then they started working on the deserts, and they found ways to irrigate. And now look at it. It is. They call it the breadbasket of Europe. because it supplies almost all the food for Europe and other places too. So amazing how God has changed that. And the flight pattern of the, or migration pattern of the birds, there were almost no birds coming over during this time. And then around 1940s, they started to change. With the rains coming back, they started their flight patterns back over the Red Sea, coming from the Mediterranean and coming through there. So now they've just got hundreds of kinds of birds. Just amazing. Just, God's getting them ready for that big feast they're going to have one of these days. So it's interesting how God protected the land for them because he was going to bring them back to it. And he keeps his promises. Verse 31, I will set your border from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines and from the wilderness of Euphrates, for I will give the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before you. So that's a big parcel of land, and they've just got a little tiny bit of it now. If you look on your map, do you have this one? You see where Israel is, this little tiny slip of thing here. I think they say it's about as big as New Jersey. It's just little compared to all of this, and yet the Arabs can't stand us to have them there. It just sticks in their craw. It makes me think of Haman, He couldn't stand to go past Mordecai. Just looking at him made him want to get rid of him. So they were to actually have, here's the Euphrates way over here. The land was to go clear over there and clear down into here. It says the Red Sea, and the Red Sea goes clear down here, so it could take in even down in here. Because I do believe that they walked in through here when they were in the wilderness. Because right down in here would be where Jethro lived. So I'm sure they went down into that area. So all of this clear up to where the Philistines were up above Lebanon, way up here. So they would have this whole big area. Someday they will have all that area. That's what God promised them. But right now they just got that little slip. "32, you shall make no covenant with them and their gods." When they get into the promised land, they were not to take any oaths or make any covenants with these Canaanites, because they were to get rid of them completely. This did not, however, refer to any nations outside of that land. They could do oaths, make oaths with any other nations, because they've made oaths with Egypt and Jordan, and, just in modern times. So God allows that, but he did not allow them to make any covenants with anyone within their promised land. "They shall not dwell in your land, lest they make you sin against me." So this is saying he wants them gone. "For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you." Okay. Why did God say it was necessary to wipe out the Canaanites? Why do you think he had to get rid of all of them?
They were bad people, idolatry.
They were so bad, we can't even, people that have actually looked into that, just, you don't even want to know. You just don't want to know it. Deuteronomy 20:18 gives us the reason, and he says it's to protect the children of Israel from idolatry, which is pretty much the same thing as he said here. And God's judgment here on these people, where he's going to wipe them out, is called harem warfare. Harem warfare. And you see that harem, it's kind of connected with Haran, which means destroy. So total destruction. It means to devote something to total destruction. And this judgment against the Canaanites is actually a foreshadowing of the final judgment, when he's going to wipe out all evil at the end of the tribulation. Well, not tribulation. I guess he's going to wipe some of them out then, but finally, after the millennium, the final judgment will be after the millennium. You can't have moral laws without a lawgiver, and so we have to remember that. And I think about the humanists. They attempt to have laws, but they don't have any basis on which to form their laws. If you don't have God as the ultimate source, where do you go with it? It'll be, anyone can decide what's right or wrong, and that's, of course, they try to tell us that and try to teach the kids that, and that's why they do anything they want. They don't have that lawgiver in the law to keep them on the right path. This term, haram laws, was first found back in chapter 22:20, where he said, he will pronounce the sentence of haram. That's in Hebrew. That's actually what it's saying there. Even with this haram law, he was merciful. He allowed repentance to a Canaanite woman. Anybody remember who the Canaanite woman was? Yeah, Rahab. Yeah, and you remember her story and how she helped the spies, and so he forgave her. So even the Canaanites, as wicked as they were, he would forgive with repentance. He's that way, and he's going to allow it. The haram law really finished when Jesus came on the earth. He put that aside. It's not dead, but it's now spiritual rather than a physical thing. And so we'll kind of go into that a little later. I want you to go to Matthew 15 and verse 21. And this is the woman who was petitioning Yeshua. When Jesus went away from there and withdrew to the district of Tyre and Sidon, now you have to know that's the northern part, way above Israel, and that is the land of the Philistines. So we're talking about the tip-top area of what would be their land. And it says right here, and behold, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and was crying. How could that be? They were supposed to get rid of all the Canaanites. They didn't. They failed to do that, didn't they? But here she's saying, have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. She's recognizing who he is. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon. But he didn't answer a word. And his disciples came and begged him, saying, send her away, for she's crying out after us. See, they looked upon any Canaanites as dogs because they knew they were supposed to have wiped them out. And here she was still alive, and they just considered her a dog. That's just what they thought of her. Send her away. She's crying out after us. And he answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So who are the lost sheep that he's referring to? All the Jews. So he's saying, this isn't time for me to be taking care of anybody else. I'm talking to the Jews right now. But she came and knelt before him, saying, Lord, help me. And he answered, is it not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs? So many people look at this and say, he's calling her a dog. Well, he's doing it in the context of what everybody thought of him. Okay. And she said, yes, Lord. And she realized that. Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat crumbs that fall from their master's table. And when Jesus answered her, O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire. and her daughter was healed instantly. So here is another example of mercy to a Canaanite. Even though she should not have been alive, he was showing his mercy. Okay. Ephesians 6:12. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts and wickedness in the heavenly places. So this is the spiritual haram law that we have now. We are trying to destroy, they are trying to destroy us, and we will ultimately, with God's help, God will destroy them. Well, that wraps this up, but I want to go back a little bit, and I want to talk about God's judgment of destruction. God, I say this many times, but God is a God of order. His whole universe was created in order, and it functions in an orderly way, and everything would not survive even a nanosecond, whatever that is, without his constant continuation of this. When we look at everything is circular in the world. Just kind of visualize a circle. The universe is basically circular. Everything goes around something else. We go around the sun, the moon goes around. Every universe is the same way. And then you look at the year. The year is circular. We go from the first month to the 12th month, and then we start in again, over and over, year after year after year. Time is circular. Minutes, seconds, minutes, hours, and then days, 7 days, and then start over again. Okay. Every 7 years, we get new cells. Did you know that? I always found that interesting. Completely new bunch of cells in your body. That's number 7 just pops up all the time, doesn't it? Here's where I'm going with this. God uses the circular idea of seed, planting, and harvest as circular. You've got your seed, you plant it, and you harvest it. Rotation, seed, plant, harvest. Okay, that works in life as well. Whatever seed you plant, you're going to harvest. If you plant good seed in a good ground, you're going to have a wonderful crop. If you plant bad seed, you're going to get a bad crop. So we have to remember everything we plant will be a harvest of some sort. God wants all good for us. He intended at the very beginning for everything to be wonderful for us and just a wonderful life for us. And then we blew it. But he knew, but he made a way for us to correct that. But in the meantime, there's still this circular thing going on. And people say, well, God is so mean to have to destroy these Canaanites. Well, they planted seed, and they harvested what they got. God is just. He doesn't change. He didn't want to do that. He doesn't want anyone to perish. He says that he wants no one to perish. But he can't change. He's given us free will. He will not interrupt that because that is our choice. He does everything he can to call us back. But we have that choice. And the Canaanites ended up the same way. They started out way back. They knew everything, but it just got worse and worse and worse. And so we cannot blame God for being just. He is simply bringing justice to those, and he will, with the final judgment, he will bring justice. He doesn't want to, but he has to do it. And so it's a way to look at things, you know, and you can't blame God for the things that happen because those seeds we planted ourselves. And so we can turn to him and he can correct things, and we still have consequences usually to pay for, but that is the only answer. And so just understanding this circular thing helps us to realize that God only wants what's good for us, and we have to look within ourselves to see where the real problem is. Next week there'll be chapter 24, and we're going to look at Shekinah glory, and that's going to be a fascinating thing. And we're going to look at the meaning of sapphire and how it's mentioned in the Bible, and maybe things that you haven't ever realized before about the sapphire. So
Sounds good.
it's really, I find that a real exciting topic. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see everyone next week. And so let's pray. Father God, we just thank you for your word. Thank you for giving us understanding to things that maybe are a little difficult to understand, Lord. And we just ask you to help us this week. Bless everyone here, Lord, and everyone that might be watching to share your word. And we love you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay.